Hello everyone, Shinto Bean here with another faction focus video, trying to actually finish off this series that I started a while back. Today we are going to be looking at Servants of the Emperor. In the 40k universe, the Imperium is made up of a lot of sub-factions. We've got your Astra Militarum, Adeptus Mechanicus, Sororitas, Custodes, and all of these sub-factions are included within the Servants of the Emperor. So they have a very large and varied roster of units. It's second only to Space Marines in terms of the number of cards in their roster. So a lot to choose from. I will say that I actually am missing quite a few cards from this faction. There were actually a lot of limited time offers, including several legendaries that I do not own. So sadly, I cannot talk about those. But I will just focus on what I have in my collection and try to talk about that I have found the most useful. So first of all, let's talk about the warlords. We got 3 warlords currently in the game, and they all function in the same way in terms of their special rule. Whenever one of your cards is destroyed, the ability triggers. So first of all, for the best melee option, we got Canoness Viridian. She has a very powerful special rule. Whenever one of your units is destroyed, another one at random will make an attack for 75% of its melee stat. So obviously with this you're going to want to include a lot of your big melee damage dealers, as well as some fodder units that can die off, and then stronger cards to attack. She is pretty strong, and her special rule actually used to deal 100% of the melee damage, but it had to get nerfed because it was just too strong. But still a solid option. But her stats, like actually a lot of the Servants of the Emperor warlords, her stats for the warlord are pretty weak, so it's the bodyguards that are going to be doing most of the work. Next up we got Magos Dominus Ivasnafan. This guy is a healer. He can heal up whenever one of your cards is destroyed, the remaining ones will gain 20 health. So this allows your bodyguards to survive for a lot longer than they normally would be able to, and like the Canoness, you want to include some really strong cards and have those get healed over time. So this guy, I mean, he's actually pretty fun to play as, not so fun to play against. But yeah, again, the warlord, he has pretty weak stats, so you preferably don't want him on the field. And then finally we got Commissar Yarrick. This guy, I believe, is the cheapest warlord in the game at only 16 points. He's my personal favorite, actually. A special rule: whenever one of your cards is destroyed, another one on the field will ready twice. So to utilize this special rule in the most effective way, I think it's best to have units that can buff one of your stats when readying. I like to go ranged with Commissar Yarrick. So yeah, it's pretty fun as you get constantly buffed throughout the battle. And he actually has a pretty decent melee attack as well as Inspiring Presence, so once he hits the field he can actually deal quite a bit of damage. Alright, moving on to the bodyguards. At the top we have the most expensive things up here. First of all, we've got the Valkyrie. This one is quite fun to use. I like using it with Magos Dominus. It's got outflank, just deals a massive amount of damage and has a huge amount of health as well. I don't think it's quite as effective with Commissar Yarrick, but yeah. Next up we got the Warglaive. This one I haven't really used very much. It got the big game hunter trait. It just doesn't really deal quite enough damage for my liking. And Servants of the Emperor actually have quite a few cards like this with a lot of health but not so much damage, and those ones I tend to avoid. The Leman Russ battle tank, this is a new addition to the game, so I only have it at level 4. Once leveled up, this can deal a massive amount of range damage, so later on I think it would be a fun one to use. Penitent Engine is definitely one of the best units in the entire roster, I think. Has a massive melee attack, so it's actually really good in almost any situation, but particularly with Canoness. Next up we got the Dunecrawler. This is a really good unit. Lots of damage, and a decent melee attack as well once upgraded. So yeah, just a solid option for any ranged deck. Next we got a legendary here, Celestine. She is also a very powerful melee warrior, high initiative as she can fly, and inspiring presence, which is always a good ability. She also has a lot of health, so she is also a good option for the Canoness. I'm gonna skip over some of these other weaker cards with less damage. Recently I have been using Junith a bit with Commissar Yarick. She's just a solid card, can deal a decent amount of damage and has shield. One other thing about Servants of the Emperor, a lot of their cards have shields, I think more than any other faction. They have a few Psychers. This is the most powerful Psycher, I believe. At least the most powerful one I have in my collection. I've never really used him though. You might be able to fit him in somewhere, but he just, I don't know. I don't feel like Psychers are really the best option. They don't really synergize the best with the current Servants of the Emperor warlords. Going on down the line in terms of the ones that I've used the most, Alea and Valerian, another very good option for Canoness. I think they got inspiring presence and pretty cheap points cost, but lots of melee damage. And a few of these other units. This guy is one of the first cards that I got in the game, and early on he was actually pretty good, but I really don't use him anymore. He just doesn't really deal enough damage for my liking. Got an assassin here, the Vindicator Assassin. Solid choice for a ranged heavy deck. Recently got target acquired, which I still think is kind of a weak trait. It could use a little bit of a buff, I think, because it's a little too situational, but stats wise this is a good card. And let's see, a lot of these cards down here in the mid-range I don't really use that much. The thing about Servants of the Emperor, their warlords, is I feel like it works best if you use a couple really strong, expensive units along with a few really weak fodder units. So it's kind of like you're taking both extremes, like really strong and really weak. And meanwhile, the mid-ranged units are not really quite as good, I feel like, but that's my opinion. There are some decent ones. I think this guy has potential. I personally like Berserkers a lot, so this guy can deal a surprising amount of damage in the right situations. Sly Marbo, this guy I used to use as well. Early on, he is pretty good. He's got fear, but again, not a whole lot of damage, so I don't really use him anymore. This guy, I just have to mention this guy. He's got Taunt. They've buffed this guy several times because I think he's just been really unpopular. I can't remember ever seeing him in ranked mode. But yeah, again, high health but very little damage. Got a few more cards with shield in here, and yeah, just a mix of ranged and melee with the occasional Psyker. This lady here recently got her trait switched to Taunt. It used to be Furious Charge, I think. Actually, a lot of the cards got their traits switched around. It's kind of hard to keep track of that, and so that's the thing. There's a lot of changes that occur with each balance patch, and so what I'm talking about here could very well be outdated a couple months from now. So just take it with a grain of salt. If you do want to include Psychers, this is actually a pretty decent option if you have it in your collection. Let's see, what else do we have? I've used this guy a little bit, Commissar Chelik. He is a very cheap option, the cheapest one with inspiring presence. And let's see. This guy, this Sulphur Hound, recently got poison, and poison can be pretty good, I think, on a cheap unit like this. So down here we're getting to the fodder units, very cheap cost, disposable type units. Of the cheap units though, This is one of the best, I think. Very low cost. I just have managed to get it to a very high level. But yeah, only 6 points, but a surprising amount of health and range damage. So yeah, that's a pretty cost-effective card. Also, something that's really good with Servants of the Emperor is the Endless trait, because the Warlords special rules trigger whenever your card is destroyed. Endless allows this guy to come back to life, which will then allow your Warlord special rule to activate twice. So very good option for Magos Dominus and Commissar Yarrick. This guy has Endless, as well as this soldier over here, the Shock Trooper. So yeah, those are definitely ones I would recommend including once they have their trait unlocked. They're not as effective with Canoness though, because of the potential of them using their melee attack, which just would not deal any damage. And yeah, the other ones, I mean, a lot of these are kind of interchangeable. The only two in here that I think are worth noting are okay, there's the image took a little while to show up there. Medicae, very cheap, only 4 points for a good amount of healing, so that's a good one to include. As well as this guy. This guy used to have a shield, but his trait was switched to Taunt. So low cost Taunt, always a good option, I think, particularly for Canoness Viridian. So yeah, that is the Servants of the Emperor roster in a nutshell. I did skip over quite a few of the cards here, but there's just a little too many to talk about. And yeah, if you have any questions about these guys, let me know in the comments. And yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.